Section 38 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. Thankfulness. Surely never was a happier, humbler band of victors than these who now returned along the road to the precinct. Nikander and Etion bearing Dryas on a litter. The temple guardsmen now laughing aloud with some recollection of battle triumph, now awed into silence, as one of them told of the divine shoutings he had heard, or the terrible dealing of those rocks which fell from on high upon the enemy. The other Delphians who had rushed down from hiding in the hills kept silence. Every one of them was wishing he had stayed with the guard in the precinct. Outside the gate, Theria met them with outstretched arms and tears of joy. She kissed Etion and her father, and knelt down by Dryas's litter, bending over him in love. "Darling Dryas!" Then, "Quick, I must help him." Dryas's face was white with pain, but he caught her hand. "I am safe now," he whispered. "Really, really safe." He closed his eyes. "He saved my life," spoke Etion proudly, "and fought better than any of us. Oh, my son, dear, dear boy," cried Nikander. "I saw him in the fight," asserted one of the guard. "That's true what you say." In the entrance portico of the precinct, they set him down, while Theria sent slaves for water and wine, and other slaves homeward for the remedies of her own. Soon she was bathing Dryas's deep wounds, staunching their flow with the wine, setting the poor broken leg, which, while it would mend, would never let Dryas walk perfectly straight again. Dryas bore his pain with a look which ever and again started her tears, the look of a child come home. As soon as Melantho came to replace her, Theria turned to attend Etion's wounds. She knelt before him, binding up his bleeding ankle, then carefully washed the deep gash in his shoulder where the sword had grazed over the top of his shield. Her heart sang with the task. Nikander, perhaps because he was an older, more skillful warrior, had received only scratches. Indeed, the fight had not been long. The Persians had been conquered by the god ere ever man struck one blow. More and more Delphians crowded into the precinct. The happy news seemed to have mounted on wings of its own to those who had been hidden on Parnassus. They came down in groups or singly, and each as he entered had to hear the story again from those fortunate ones who had stayed. All the talk was of the wonders, the portents, the direct action of the god. They told each other the tales which were to become the rich traditions of their race. Their faith grew with the telling, and who shall say that their faith was vain? Even we today receive the benefit of that strange repulse, which helped to keep Europe what it was, to make it what it is today. We may not explain it as they did, but the mysterious deciding succor is a basic historical fact. Apollo had saved more than his visible treasures by this prompt defense. Now other Delphians came in with armfuls of battle litter they had found on the road. The curious wicker shields, despicable in Greek eyes, rich torn garments, gold chains, head pins set with rubies, the silly Persian caps which set them all a-laughing, and a whole mule pack of trousers which made them laugh still more. Men, full-grown men, to hamper their legs with such a foolish gear. They found also the curious horse heads which the black men had worn. They were but skins flayed, with ears and mane remaining. "And we thought those were monsters, and were afraid," laughed one. "But all the gold must be saved for the god. No gift of ours, but his own, his right," said another. Instantly all assented to this. Their hearts were dewy fresh with gratitude. They were like noisy, happy children. Melantho was bending over Dryas. He had reacted now from the first shock and was restless with fever. "Oh, let us go home," pleaded Melantho. "See, this is no place for my sick boy. Oh, I want to go home." Poor homebody, she was almost in terror at being from under her accustomed roof. Nikander held Dryas's hand. His face clouded as he answered her. "If we go, we shall have to do without Theria's help," he answered. "I can care for my son," said Melantho. "But Theria, surely today the priest will let her." Nikander was looking away. "I do not dare to provoke them," he said very low. Dryas stirred with a moan of pain. "Yes, wife," Nikander decisively. "I know that we should go." He went over to where Theria and Aetion together were binding up the leg of a stout young guardsman, he howling with true Greek ardor. Nikander touched Theria's arm. "Daughter," he said, "Dryas is growing worse, and I fear we must take him home." "Yes, and father, we must see that the litter slaves walk slowly and very steadily. I will try." Tears filled Nikander's eyes. "Dear heart, I wish I could take you with us. I do not dare to take you," he said. Theria whitened as sorrow stole over and fixed itself upon her face. She moved closer to him. "I had forgotten," she whispered. "Oh, father, I want to go home, home." Nikander answered nothing. He could not answer. He led her over to a corner. "Oh," she moaned, "that I should have begged to be a priestess. How foolish, witless." "I was the fool to allow you. But remember, daughter, always remember the deed which priesthood let you do. Your prayer to the winds was answered, abundantly answered. You helped to save the fleet, my darling, and you did it thinking you must die for doing it." His praise took her by surprise, but it only made it more impossible to part from him. She stole into his arms like a frightened child. He dared not tell her the hope he had for her. It was too faint a hope for that. He knew well that his best comforting was to remind her of what her priesthood had accomplished. "Your Salamis oracle. We have yet to hear from that. The battle must even now be raging at Athens. They tell me that never would Themistocles have kept the Athenians to their task, but for that oracle to hearten them. You gave the oracle as being your own, but you know now it was the gods." She was trembling with the sobs. She must keep still. "And daughter, never go to the tripod again," he urged. "Promise me that." "Never, never the tripod," she answered. "No matter how they push you, no matter what rights." "No, no." Here Aetion came over to them, asking, "What is it?" And before they answered, knowing what it was. "But no, 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 Nikander, not the Pythia house again," he pleaded. Nikander had to take charge with decision. "It must be, Aetion, it must be. Go, Aetion, and take Dryas home. I will care for Theria." There was no chance for goodbye in what the lovers felt to be the last parting. As for Nikander, mounting the sacred way with his arm about his child, the joy of victory, the safety of Delphi, were lost in bitter heartaches and self-reproach. End of chapter 38. Section 39 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger, by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. Nikander pleads for his daughter. Early the next morning, Nikander returned to the precinct. The smoke of the great altar was lifting in a glorious column. Not one priest of Delphi but had promised gifts to the far darter if he would but save them, and now they were offering those gifts. Nikander mingled with the crowd on the temple platform. He was heavy-hearted where all were gay. Old Echeritus was sitting on the temple steps, worn out with hours of ritual. A little squat Delphic farmer was talking to him. Nearby stood 2 cloaked females. "And, Echeritus," said the eager little man, as if driving a bargain, "you can't get any better anywhere. The 2 of 'em at once, and portents to both of them." "Bring them here," said the old shrine president. The man pushed the 2 females to the front and without ceremony flicked off their veils. He showed 2 girls as alike as 2 peas. They were peasant-built but flabby. Their faces brown because the sun had made them so, had somehow a look of paleness under the brown. The eyes of both were large and haunted as if with ill health. They were simpering with the excitement. "Hiroyoshi here is the oldest," went on the farmer. "Before she was born, my wife had a dream. Any of the neighbors can tell you, for Payan help us, she told it enough. She dreamed that she was searching for her baby in the mountains, and she found it, a little weeping thing lying on top of a milking stool. She started to take it off of the milking stool, but quick the milking stool shot up tall with its 3 legs, a very tripod, and she couldn't reach the baby. Now I ain't no reader of dreams, but what do you think of that, Echeritus? Doesn't it seem pointing the baby to be Theria?" Old Echeritus nodded. He was much impressed. "And this other one here, Timo, before she was born, Pan help us. The same dream for her, too." Echeritus was not listening. He was studying the girls. Well did he know the successful Pythia type. The little farmer turned to Nikander. "Now ain't they just made for Pythias?" he demanded. "The both on 'em, and free-born Delphians both." Nikander studied them. He was trying to keep his judgment clear and unbiased by his earnest wish. If these girls were made Pythias at once, would it not afford a chance to secure his daughter's freedom? Echeritus turned to Nikander. "These might put your daughter in the background," he said. "You will forgive me, Nikander, if I say that these have more Pythia look than has Theria." "My daughter is not the Pythian type," said Nikander, trying to speak indifferently. "I realize that, Echeritus. Anyway, we require 3 Pythias. It has been the custom and is right." That afternoon, a council of all the priests was held to decide upon the farmer girls. Beforehand, Nikander sought his kinsman, Timon. Perhaps Timon would listen now as he would not on that other occasion when Nikander had spoken, when the Persians were so nigh at hand. Nikander must steer his course carefully. Timon must not suspect the dangerous truth, Theria's deception on the tripod. Yet Nikander must bring forth every argument possible for his child's release. "Timon," he began, "I am feeling more and more that my daughter Theria is not the Pythia type." "Not the type," repeated his kinsman. "But she gave magnificent oracles, Nikander, very unusual oracles, and the manner of giving was unusual also. Do not you think so?" Timon looked sharply at Nikander, or did Nikander fancy it? Nikander had much ado to keep himself steady and unmoved. He hastily changed the subject. "Yes, they were good oracles, but the girl is breaking too fast under the ecstasy. That, of course, would make me wish to have her cease prophesying. But that is not all. I would not let mere personal feelings sway me. You know that, Timon." "Yes. Theria had a vision on the mountain. You have no doubt of that, have you?" Timon assented. To the Greek, this was easy of belief. Timon had seen Theria in her state of trance. He had seen her yesterday, and even then the expression of her face showed the vision state through which she had passed. Yes, Theria had seen a vision. "She has lately told me more about it," pursued Nikander. "Apollo spoke to her. She has told me the words of the god, and I have written them down." With a hand he could not keep from trembling, Nikander brought forth the tablet. Timon read it slowly, as Greeks were wont to read. Again he read it. No priestess of mine art thou, be gone from my temple. Nay, for I love thee, thou hast sung at my bidding. Was all this in it when you spoke of this before? Asked Timon seriously. Yes, the same. I remember only the silver shaft of Apollo, but this, why, Nikander, the god, has actually driven the girl from this temple. It might even be dangerous to hold her there after this express command. Do you think that? Queried Nikander eagerly. Will you say that in the council? But suppose she is freed, what should then be done with her? Asked Timon. But with this encouragement, Nikander determined to apply formally to the priest's council for her release. Never in all his days would Nikander forget the bitter anxiety of that afternoon with the council. Many strifes had he striven with that august body. Strifes for the good name of Delphi, strifes for the honor and safety of Hellas, yet never one that had given him this suffocation at the thought of defeat. Timon became his earnest helper, and Nikander sorely needed help. Never before, maintained the older priest, never before had the Pythia been given back to her family or been given in marriage. It would cause a pestilence. But as the debate progressed, Nikander gradually became aware of his own new power in the council. For many months, Nikander had been the sole one who had counseled resistance to the Persian. It was Nikander who had supplicated for the more hopeful oracles and received them. Suppose the more timid interpretations had prevailed, where would the Delphians now be? Nikander had been right, and his prayers had changed the mind of the god. Now Nikander was making a strange request. Might he not be right in this also? Surely Nikander would not ask this save in honest conviction. Had Nikander ever been selfish toward the shrine? Would he ask that his daughter be dismissed if it were likely to bring disaster? Did he not bring them now the god's actual command, be gone from my temple? Nikander saw friend after friend spring to his feet with arguments like these until his heart warmed, and in a clear, impassioned speech he moved the council to his side. It was old Acharitas who made answer. Apollo has spoken to free the girl. It is not usual, but neither is it usual for Apollo to appear in person and hurl mountains upon the enemy. It is a time of portents and wonders. Let the girl be free, and at once. Nikander's brain whirled as this verdict was pronounced. But a still further joy awaited him. Koban, who had always been his bitterest antagonist, now rose in the council and proposed to elect Dryas, son of Nikander, to the priesthood. Also to give Dryas the crown for the best warrior in yesterday's battle. End of chapter 39. Section 40 of the Perilous Seat. This was a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. Again, home. On leaving the council, Nikander did what no other father in Hellas would have done. He went first to release his daughter before bringing the good news to his son. He could not bear that Theria should learn her freedom from any but himself. Old Acharitas went with him to confirm his authority in the Pythia house. To tell the truth, they ascended the precinct with no little trepidation. If you had asked who ruled the priests in Delphi, not one would have answered, the old peasant woman Touche. Yet such was the case. Touche had a tongue of fire. Acharitas knocked faintly, and the authoritative one herself appeared. But she told the news quite otherwise than they had expected. Theria? No pithiness, ye say? And did it take all ye men in day-long council to find that out? I knew it from the first. She's no Pythia. No, not if she gave the best oracles ever. Take her away, do, before she puts notions into the heads of the two new ones, good as gold. Nikander did not wait for the finish. He ran past Touché into Theria's room. Theria sat there on her couch, staring at nothing in the same melancholy apathy which before had so troubled the temple women. She did not rouse until her father stood quite before her. Then up went her longing hands. "Father, father," she whispered amazedly. But Nikander in his delight threw both arms about her. "You are free, my own darling Theria. You are free," he said. "The council has freed you." But he should have been more careful with his news. "No," she said wildly. "Oh, I have to stay here. Here, all my life, all my life." "Not one further minute," he asserted. "Dear child, I have come to take you home." At this dear telling, she burst into uncontrollable weeping. "Touché will not let me," she kept saying like a frightened child. "No, she will not let me." "By the gods, she will. Theria, quiet yourself. There, dear little one, father will care for you now." He was like a tender nurse comforting her. He called the temple slave. "Get this Pythia robe off my daughter at once," he commanded. "Where is the white robe in which she came?" He himself helped to fasten the shoulder pins, unheard of service for a father. Often he kissed her when her tears ran down afresh. By his excitement, he made it the harder for her to grow calm. Then he threw the himation over her head and face and hurried her out. They reached home after a happy walk hand in hand. The open air was always tonic to Theria. She was her bright self again when they had reached the threshold. Melantho and Aetion were tending Dryas in the aula. With a cry, Aetion leaped up, knowing the beloved figure before her face was revealed. Melantho ran to her. Dryas reached out arms from his couch, calling, "Sister, sister," and the slaves came hurrying from everywhere. Nikander had to explain 100 questions how she came to be really free. Dryas kept her hand affectionately. "Now home will be home," he said. "It has never been the same since you went away." "Dear Theria," laughed Nikander, "even the fish have tasted wrong. I did not know you directed the cooking of the fish." Then he turned to Dryas. "Dryas," he questioned, "have they told you the news?" "What news?" Then all the joyfulness was to be gone through again, as Nikander told of Dryas's election to the priesthood and his crowning. Nikander, being by nature courageous, was never quite to realize the struggle Dryas had had to win such a crown. But fine deeds he did know, and felt new kinship with his son, and all the old love and pride. As the two were talking together, Aetion softly drew Theria aside. How strong and heavenly the joy in his face as he kissed her! Theria had never known how godlike Aetion was until now, his eyes so shining upon her and so full of awe. What was this strange love which had come to her from the gods, a thing so unheard of for a mere Greek girl? Their very silence together seemed holy, difficult to break. "Oh, do you think that father will allow—" she began, and then, realizing she was about to ask, she blushed and hushed her speech. "Allow us what, dear Theria?" He lifted her hands in both of his, hardly listening to her words. And before he could answer, Melantho broke in upon them. "Great heavens, Theria, what are you doing? What am I doing to let you stay here? Come back to our aula at once." Theria was too happy to be disobedient. She took her mother's hand and went back with her to the woman's apartment, where the door was quickly shut. End of chapter 40. Section 41 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. A Sculptor's Respectability. Now that abnormal conditions were past, Nikander and his family returned to the conventional ways. Theria must not meet nor see the Etienne. Of course she must not. She must be shut in the woman's court whenever he came to the house. Nikander gave his formal consent to the marriage. He loved Etienne with all his heart. The good youth now would have been his choice for Theria, even if Theria had no wish in the matter. Yet as the days went by, Nikander dreaded the marriage. Marriage with a Metic was indeed a serious step. Nikander knew his daughter well. He knew that while she now made the sacrifice gladly, that later, when she saw her sons excluded from the priesthood, herself excluded from processional rites, and perhaps taunted by women of her own class, Theria's proud spirit would revolt. He even wondered if her love would outlast the strain. Love so burning bright in youth may be strangely quenched by hard conditions. Nikander's attitude unconsciously affected Etienne. He too, now that he faced his marriage, realized how sad a sacrifice he was asking of her who had set him free. He had hoped that Theria would speak to him from her window so that he could ask her of these things face to face. But this Theria was too loyal to do. She sent her messages by her father. "Soon will come our lifelong happiness," she said. "We must bear this parting now." At last, Etienne was in serious misery for the trials looming ahead. He sent question to Theria by Nikander. Had she thought of all the future? Did she want to decide again? Nikander came back laughing. "Never send me on such an errand again, young man," he told him. "She was almost as abusive as old Touche herself. She said she had not supposed that you would so insult her, that if she were as great a fool as you seemed to be, she would retaliate by distrusting your love, but that she does not do. She trusts your love, and you by this time should trust hers." Etienne laughed joyously. "Apollo bless her! She is as lovely in her anger as in everything else." Upon which Nikander named him an Eros-infatuated youth. But the incident cleared the air. From that time Nikander trusted his daughter's decision. So, Melantho having made ready the linens, garments, and embroideries she considered essential, Theria and Etienne were betrothed before witnesses, solemnly in the aula. For a few happy moments they stood together and touched hands, though Theria had to be veiled. The ceremony was more binding than the wedding which was to follow later. Theria returned to her room, knowing that now she belonged to Etienne as his goods and chattels belonged, but her heart was singing for joy. It was at the betrothal feast, when it was too late for mending, that Etienne revealed his one defect. They were chatting after the meal, or rather sitting silent while Etienne talked. For none of the youths of Delphi had had such adventures as Etienne. By storm of ocean, by cruelty of pirates, deceit of merchants in the ports. As a captive he had seen practically all the far ports of the West. Etienne sat upright on his couch, too animated to recline, his dark eyes now brightening with some memory, now filling with terror or triumph. Near him was one of the many small tables of a Greek room. Upon this table had been left, no doubt by Kairos himself, the god of chance, a double handful of smooth clay. It had been brought that morning by some citizens from far away who wanted to establish a sale for it in Delphi. Nikander had pronounced it the finest in texture he had ever seen. Then it had been left here. Etienne idly picked it up as he talked, working it with his deft fingers. Gradually it became soft, malleable. Absently he shaped it into a thick pillar, then, as if in sudden decision, began to mold it. He ceased talking, forgot his guests entirely, quite unconscious that they were watching what he did. Under his swift fingers the clay soon took the form of a youth. "Look, it is beautiful," whispered Dryas, wondering. Now Etienne looked up impatiently, seized upon a plectrum as a tool, and began to work again in mad haste. More and more lovely the little youth became, not standing on both feet in the hieratic attitude, but leaning forward with one leg advanced as if running, head thrown back and both arms outstretched toward an invisible goal. Time passed by, but Etienne was unaware of it. Now began the muscle molding, dry and at points stylized, yet lovely and alive, the delicate thighs of full strength, the spare abdomen showing the play of running muscles, the chest lifted and full of breath. "It is Lottis," they cried, "Lottis, the Argive runner." Now Etienne began to etch the hair in fine drawn lines in the old fashion, and bind it down with a fillet. Nikander saw at once that this figure was the result of long and intense imagining of the mind. Etienne could not otherwise have modeled with such swiftness. The skill, too, was no idle skill. It was the result of long hours of training and toil. At length it satisfied its creator. Etienne breathed deep, looked up and saw all the company gazing at him, and laughed a quick, embarrassed laugh. "Etienne," spoke Nikander, amazed, "surely you are not a sculptor." Etienne hung his head. "I sometimes think I am," he confessed. "But your father Euclides was a high-born citizen. He surely would not give you over to the sculptor's trade." "No," answered Etienne, then on the defensive. "But after all, Nikander, is there any nobler way of honoring the gods than by beautiful sculpture? What would Delphi be without its statues and its songs?" "Oh, but Etienne, this is handcraft. See, your hands are soiled even now. Song is the work of the mind alone." "But you use the hand to play the lyre," said Etienne, quickly hiding his dirty hands in his himation. "Apollo presides over song," retorted Nikander. "No such god fosters sculptor work." "There is Hephaestus." "The ugly, lame god! By heaven, Etienne, you are no Hephaestus." Everybody laughed. "The beautiful Etienne himself, with the limping, grizzled one." "I am serious," insisted Nikander. "You must explain this thing. Who taught you?" "Ageladas," answered Etienne. "But of course my father never knew." "Ah, no wonder you model well," said Nikander, "for Ageladas, the Argive, was the greatest teacher of sculpture in Greece." "My pedagogus was Ageladas's friend," went on Etienne, "and he used to stop with me at Ageladas's workshop on our way from school." Well, I played with the clay as I do now, and Ageladas saw and praised me. But oh, it was not the praise, it was the love of making beautiful gods and men which possessed me. All through my school hours I forgot my Homer, longing to be at work with Ageladas. I bribed my pedagogus again and again to bring me there. Myron was in the workshop too, and I learned at his side. Then one day Ageladas told me he would exhibit one of my statues as his own. Etienne laughed softly, and tears came into his eyes. Never shall I forget my father stopping by my own statue. "This is most beautiful of all," he said. "This youth pouring the libation. See how he worships, how shyly he supplicates before his God." Then such happiness welled up within me that I could not speak. Dear father, he never guessed that the statue was mine. Nikander took Etienne's hand. "But now, Etienne, now that you are a Delphian, a son of my house, surely you will not do this curious thing, which no well-born citizen would do. Delphi will give you large activities." "No, dear Nikander," answered Etienne gently. "No." He took the little runner and with a fierce pressure sent him back into the clay whence he had come. "Oh, don't do that," cried they all at once, for they loved its loveliness. "It would perish anyway," said Etienne sadly. "The clay would soon crack." End of chapter 41. Section 42 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. The Unwilling Colonist. On the faraway coast of Sicily, the western outpost of the world, lay the little town of Inessa. One day men came from the neighboring town Catana, attacked Inessa, and razed it to the ground. This was done while Theria was yet spinning at home, before she was immured in the Pythia house. And this one cruel act, performed by men she had never known, in a town whose name she had never heard, was to affect Theria's life more profoundly than any act of father, mother, or brother. It was her fate. A purposeful intent thus seemed to run through circumstance, deflecting it toward a far-off goal. Most of Inessa's inhabitants were killed outright, but among those who were cast upon the world was an awkward youth, one Perilous, son of Inessa's most prominent citizen, but an ill-born young man who stammered abominably. This Perilous, being come to the shore of Phocis, thought it a good opportunity to visit the Delphic oracle and inquire for the curing of his speech. But when Perilous stood before the tripod, the priestess answered not at all concerning his speech, but bade him return to Sicily and rebuild Inessa. He was so disappointed that he left the tripod almost before the Pythoness had finished speaking. But from that hour misfortune followed Perilous. At last he became so frightened that he bestirred himself belatedly to obey the oracle. He secured a ship and a few people willing to go to Sicily, but still he dreaded the colonizing task. And on the very day of Theria's betrothal, Perilous reappeared in Delphi, praying to be released from Apollo's command. On this occasion, the oracle reproved him roundly. The ruins of Inessa disturb the peace of the Delphic god. Yes, and yet more misfortune shall overtake thee, unless thou rebuild Inessa on a height where trees invite the birds. Of high choice is the one who goeth with thee. Perilous next morning met Nikander in the precinct, and to him poured out his troubles. "I cannot rebuild Inessa, O priest," he said. "Only a few poor shepherds are left there. Our Catanian neighbors in their raid upon us killed all our leading citizens. They carried away our wealth and destroyed everything. Inessa is ruined beyond repair. Oh, no doubt the god means to destroy me also, and takes this way of making me worthy of death." Nikander quieted the young man, as was his wont, then bade him wait in Delphi until the priests should think and advise with each other over the problem. The young man's predicament interested Nikander. Like all Delphic priests, he loved those faraway colonies of the west: Tarentum, Catana, Syracuse, Croton, Elea, scattered at right intervals along the coast of Greater Greece. They were young in power, wonderful places of sunny beach and wooded hill, while in their backlands were stretches of the richest soil in the world. Almost all these cities had been either founded by the oracle of Delphi or greatly helped by it. To some, Delphi had given laws. To others had sent great leaders in times of need. In the case of Cyrene in Africa, The oracle had, in some secret way, selected the site and insisted by repeated commands until the fortunate city had been built. Delphi retained no lordship over these colonies, her children. She was satisfied to feed their spirit and to receive in return their worship, their tithes, and free gifts. Nikander left the young man and at once went into the cella of the great temple. Here, in the closed back room, he brought forth long-treasured maps of the priests, ancient ones of pottery, later ones of sheepskin and papyrus. He studied them absorbedly. Yes, at the site of the destroyed Enessa was a great stretch of unhabitation on the coast. A city was needed there, and a port at the mouth of the river Symaethus was good. How well the god had planned! Nikander then went to old Acharitas, who without delay summoned the council of the priests. They met not in the council house, for the day was warm, but up in the great laish, or colonnade, of the precinct. Greeks never willingly did their thinking away from the open air. Sitting thus on the stone seats, they could look down through the opening of the steep vale to the far-off bit of sapphire loveliness which was the Corinthian Gulf. Nikander showed him his map. "Yes," said Caramanor's father, whose name was Glaucus. "I remember Enessa, saw it during my travel year. I recall the back country, too. Lovely shaded heights having wide prospect. I could quite see them in memory as I stood there yesterday by the tripod. And even while I was thinking, the Pythia spoke of them. A height where the trees invite the birds. The oracle was marvelously clear." Glaucus was awestruck, for the god's message was not always so revealing. The tranced Pythia did not invariably reflect the priestly mind. "Enessa must be rebuilt," declared Timon. "Apollo has spoken it, and Apollo is lord of migrations." "Yes," agreed Nikander, "but this poor stammering Hylas cannot rebuild it. Strange it is that upon such an inefficient person the gods should have laid the charge. Within a century past we have not found it so important a city." "The god sees that Hellas cannot do it," declared a third priest, Melis. "Did you note the oracle yesterday? Of high choice the one who goeth with thee." What can that mean but that we are to choose out some real leader, some adequate, big-minded man to found the city? He must go with Hylas. Thus shall the oracle be fulfilled. "One of high choice refers to Apollo himself," declared Glaucus. "That was said to encourage Hylas on the enterprise." "That's the way I understood it," assented a young priest. Acharitas brought forth the oracle tablet, and earnestly the priests reread it. "It means another man to go with Hylas. Melis is right," said Nikander. "Why should the priestess refer to Apollo? Of course, the god always goes." "A leader is of utmost importance," urged Melis. "The god sees that and gives us the command to find a good one. It's plain as sunlight." "The oracle would be futile otherwise," put in Timon decisively. Agreement was soon reached as to the oracle's meaning and the urgent need of a leader. Then came the all-important choice of a man. "Shall he be a Delphian?" was the first question. "Yes, I think so," said old Acharitas. "Colonies are not often founded these days. It may be years before another goes out. 'Tis a rare chance to strengthen Apollo's influence in the West." "Yes, yes," chorused the priests. "A Delphian by all means." Nikander's face suddenly shone. He had wished for many a month to do some service for Caramanor and Agis in return for their honorable treatment of his poor son Lycophron. They were younger sons without means. Here was a chance to make them both rich and prominent. "I propose Caramanor and Agis, Glaucus's sons, as leaders of the colony," said Nikander. The priests discussed the two young men at length, but in the end rejected both. Honest young fellows, but not of caliber for this business. Then Dryas was proposed, but quickly rejected. Then several other men of Delphi. It was not easy to find a leader of the peculiar genius needed, fearless, yet not quarrelsome, young, yet understanding, having the statesman's uncanny vision to discern the hidden meaning of events and their unlooked-for but inevitable resultants. During this later discussion, Timon had remained quite silent. Evidently he was thinking something through before proposal. Timon's was the most original mind in the council, and Nikander awaited his word with pleasure. However, amazement rather than pleasure followed it. "O priests," at last said Timon, "has it occurred to you that there have been women who were successful oekis of colonies?" "Women? What nonsense, Timon! What are you joking about?" The council broke into puzzled laughter, for women were a perennial source of satire. No, I mean it. Did not Dido, the Tyrian, found Carthage, and was faithful to the city even unto death? Aye, but Dido was no Greek. No, but Manto was. Manto who founded Claris. She was a priest's daughter, a priest of Apollo. Suddenly Nikander guessed Timon's meaning. It was Theria, none other, whom Timon was about to propose for this high, amazing trust. But why? How could Timon know that the girl had the needed power? Nikander's little girl hidden away in her home unknown. For a moment Nikander pictured her thus, and trembled to think how this familiar Theria could wield the power of state. Then, with an overwhelming pride, he realized that she could. She could do it. What else was the meaning of her trenchant questionings, her revealing suggestions in matters which puzzled himself, her overpowering interest in public affairs in spite of all rebukes, her oracles, by which in the very face of death she had sent courage to the armies? Yes, Theria could, and the high task would meet and satisfy her mental need. But that task would take her away overseas, away to the west. Nikander would never see his child again. The very life would be torn out of him to part with her. It was too sudden, too unexpected. He must call aloud to Timon to stop. But no. Did he dare stand in Theria's way? To deprive her of this gift? Was it not her right? Her fate from the gods? Nikander hid his face from the council. They would never understand this emotion of his, this dependence upon a girl child. But what were the priests saying? With quick concern, Nikander looked up again. "It is not only foolish, Timon, it's dangerous," Melis spoke. "Give a woman power like that, she'll go mad with it." Melis was one of those Greeks, a numerous class, who hated women with a curious active hatred which seemed almost bred of fear. They laughed at it all, of course. Why could not babies be found in temples, and thus women utterly done away? Wives, what silly, miserable creatures! Heterae, what undoing of mankind! And behind all the jibing was the curious hating fear. Nikander knew that Melis would not stop short of harming Theria to keep her from being nominated. Keenly, Nikander heard the argument. "I followed you, Timon, in most of your proposals," said another priest. "But now, by the gods, this is too much. But say, old fellow, you are joking. You know you are." "It seems to me you insult all the able men of Delphi," said Glaucus. "What young man have we in Delphi who has seen Apollo face to face?" retorted Timon. "Theria, daughter of Nikander, has been found worthy to behold the god." That's so, assented some. "Go fetch her oracle tablets. Let's see what Apollo said to her," said one. A messenger was dispatched to the temple. "And not only has she beheld Apollo," went on Timon, "but she has spoken for him. Think of those 2 oracles of hers on the tripod. If it had not been for those oracles, where would Delphi be now? on the Persian side in disgrace. As it is, men are throwing the earlier oracles of Astroniki in our face. Persian lovers, they call us. Meadows, you Delphians. And for my part, I have naught to answer but Theria's oracles. That silences them. Salamis and the storm of Artemisium. She foretold them both. I foretold them, screamed Melis. But what has she to do with it? It was the god that spoke through her. She was nothing but his mouthpiece. She was more, I tell you, Melis. She understood those oracles, saw exactly whither they led. She gave them, rejoicing in what they were to accomplish. One would think, interrupted Melis, from what you say, Timon, that she made them up, and that you knew it. By Zeus, it seemed that way to me. Even at the time I thought so, said the young priest, his echo. Ah, they had scented it out, what Nikander had feared. Theria's strange deception, or was it deception? Nikander himself hardly thought so now. If this question should come up in the council, what punishment might not fall upon Theria? Who could foresee the end? Not one trace of this terror, however, showed in Nikander's face. Your true Greek was on his mettle at such time. He spoke with trumpet anger. I will not have my daughter insulted in the council. If you cannot discuss her honorably, do not discuss her at all. You all know that her oracle trance on the tripod was so real that it nearly killed her. You all know that Apollo spoke afterward to her in the mountain, and you, turning to the priest, saw her after the vision. Was ever any vision condition more patent? No, they said. That vision was true, if ever vision was. Then stop cavilling about my daughter. Either she has the power to conduct the colony, or else she has not. That alone is up for your decision. Since Salamis, Nikander had been a most powerful figure in the council, ardently loved, sincerely feared. The lovers spoke first. You know your daughter, Nikander. Tell us what you think of her. I think she can do it. Whether I am willing for her to go is another matter. Oh, Nikander added, I was as unwilling as you are to acknowledge this power in my daughter. Like you, I thought it insulted my sons, who should have it in her stead. But hers is the gift of mind. I have been taught that, obstinately fighting, I have been punished until I saw. Punished by herself? Sneered Melis. No, by some unrelenting god, he answered, with the love of Theria shining in his eyes. Remember, spoke Timon again, she has seen Apollo. We want Delphi kept alive in the hearts of her colonists. Could we do better than send one who has beheld the god? This argument won. It was as if Apollo himself were bestowing the leadership upon his ardent young priestess. Nikander and Timon left the council together. Each gazed for a moment into the other's face. Well, said Timon, smiling. Well, said Nikander, still half amazed. You have let me in for a fine adventure. Aren't you glad? Yes, I am glad, responded Nikander, but Timon saw his eyes flush with tears. You are very fond of her? Yes, oh yes, she is closer to me than any other now that I have grown to know her, but, suddenly lifting his head, how in Zeus's name did you guess her, Timon? You never meet her as I do. I did not have to guess, I saw. Saw? What do you mean? Her oracles on the tripod. She did make them, Nikander, I know that. You know it. By Zeus, it was a close shave in the council. This sudden statement was like a thunderclap. Nikander shook with fear. He seized Timon's arm. You will not accuse her. Timon, she was compelled, she was... No. Has not the god himself justified her? Who am I to offer blame? But I saw her do it, And by Zeus, it was the bravest deed, yes, and the most intelligent that I ever saw in my life. Oh, breathed Nikander. At first, I could not credit that she was doing it, even though she was pronouncing the oracle as no one had ever pronounced it, driving home its meaning, by Hermes, driving it home. Then I saw the martyr light in her face, the death light, expecting the god's lightning stroke. Did you note that agonized look just before she fell? But she had done the deed, done the thing that you and I, Nikander, couldn't bring about with all our toil and effort. Nikander was too moved to speak. Ever since then, went on Timon, the girl's genius has haunted me. Horrible, you know. Such genius to be wasted, even though it be housed in a woman. There, he ended laughing, you have my reasoning. Nikander's gratitude beamed from his face. The gods bless you, he said, for giving the girl her chance. End of chapter 42. Section 43 of the Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. The Bird in the Cage. Nikander came hurrying into the house. Where is Theria? He demanded. Time was when Nikander coming in had invariably asked, Where is Dryas? Now it was always, Where is Theria? Looking about restlessly as though home were not home until Theria appeared. Theria, she has gone to bed, answered her mother. To bed? But the sun has not yet set, said Nikander. Yes, but that's where she is all the same. She said there was nothing more to do in the house, so she had better sleep. Of course there is more to do, complained Melantho. You'd think she'd take more interest in her bridal spinning. She says there are already more linens and woolens than she can use in 20 years if she had 20 children. Well, aren't there? Laughed Nikander. I should think she would like some more just to put away, but she is so listless. Nikander smiled happily. Listless. Ah, the dear child. She would be listless no longer now that this supreme task had been thrust into her hands. How strangely that had been done, as if the god had done it beyond all human planning. Ah, what a task. The eloquent statements of the afternoon had set the colony glowing in Nikander's mind. That Theria, his child, had been chosen leader still filled him with an amazed joy. And Timon's words, they thrilled back upon Nikander like a triumphal song. He was newly proud, newly tender toward his child, who, unaided, had faced death from the god. But Timon had recognized the real power of the girl, which had quite escaped the father who loved her. Nikander wondered at this so common experience. Theria was as good as a son to him now. Had this happened to Lycophon or Dryas, could he be any happier than he was at this moment? He turned impatiently to Melantho. Think you she is asleep? He asked. Who, Theria? No, hardly yet. Have you something for her to do? By the gods, yes, answered Nikander, and strode off like a boy to Theria's room. Yes, she was asleep. How strange to see her bright face so quieted. Gods, what a quantity of dark hair she had spreading out over her pillow. What a young child she was, after all. Theria, he said, touching her shoulder. Her eyes opened wide and alarmed. Father, what has happened? Something wonderful, dear child, but you can never guess it. Are you awake enough to understand? Theria sat up, rubbing her eyes, dizzy from the depths of sleep. About Aetion? She murmured. No, not your lover, yourself, though by Hermes Aetion comes into it too. Suddenly Nikander found the matter difficult to explain. The girl there on her bed looked so tender, so young. a creature to cherish and protect, hardly to send overseas to contend with men and fate. He sat down beside her and took her slender hand, that feminine hand so curiously like his own. "It is a brand new colony," he began. "A city that is to be founded, or rather refounded, in Sicily. Yes, what has that to do with me?" How infinitely far she was from guessing the outcome. Nikander went back to the beginning, told of Hylas and his difficult oracle, of the council, of the proposal of Karamanor and Agis, of Dryas. She grew keenly interested. No, those could not be leaders, Father. I cannot think of anyone who could, anyone big enough. Let me see. She looked away, knitting her pretty brows. "The priests are not in such doubt, daughter," said Nikander tenderly. "They have chosen you." "Me?" She turned such an amazed face that Nikander had to laugh. "What on earth do you mean? Why are you joking, Father?" The same question which Melis had asked. "I am not joking, dear heart. The priests are in earnest. They chose you because you have seen Apollo. No one in our generation has done that, my child." The vision! How strange, how strange! And the priests chose me, you say? The priests? Me? Nikander went on explaining as if to dreaming ears. She seemed not to hear him. "Would Eetion go?" she queried. "Yes, he would help you, but he would not be the leader. That is for you." "For me? Oh, Father!" she suddenly cried out. "How could you suppose that I could do it? Think of the wisdom, the strength to command men, where no laws command them, to know everything for a city's good. I am not great enough. I am not even good enough, Father." "But I think you are," he told her. She leaned toward him, her lips quivering, very woman, veritable child. "I would have to go away from Delphi. I would never see Delphi again. I would never see you again. Dear, dear Father, that would be like death." He put both arms about her and was not astonished when she began to sob as if from some great shock or strain. "You will not command me to go," she pleaded. "Do not command me to go." "My dear child, of course not against your will. But do you not see the honor, the splendor of doing this thing, of making a city which shall be your own, upon which you can stamp what character you will?" "I am not great enough to stamp character upon a city. Oh no. Think if I should make some mistake which would harm the people for perhaps 100 years. And I could never think of any city as my city except Delphi. My Delphi," she repeated with all the hereditary love, the lifelong worship sounding in the word. Nikander was utterly puzzled. "Are you only a woman after all?" he asked. "Why, yes, Father. What should I be?" she asked with innocent stare. "Don't you want your freedom?" "Freedom? Oh, Father, at the price of exile?" "Exile it is, if you so consider it," he said. "There, go to sleep again. I don't believe you are half awake anyway." "Oh, yes, I am. I am awake." So he left her. Nikander's mind was strangely divided between relief and disappointment. Only a woman after all. Evidently, Timon's heroics were all misplaced. She cared only for home and loved ones. What young man would but have leaped to the task, seen the honor, joyed in the responsibility? And what should he say to the priests? How they would laugh! He could hear Melis's jibes. Timon would get the brunt of it for proposing her name. Well, after all, they both deserved it for believing such high things of a mere girl. Yet as Nikander composed himself to sleep, he was amazed at his curious sense of relief, an escape out of sorrow. How lovingly she had flung herself into his arms, and what an actual protection he had felt in that love of hers. Protection from loneliness, old age, grayness of life. Thus strangely did Theria receive the news of her freedom. Like a bird born in a cage, she did not recognize the open door. This amazing proposal had come to Theria at the most sentimental hour of her life, when the bride leaving her old home looks with vivid tenderness upon it. These days the dear old home did not imprison Theria, and the new one, with what intense hope and wonder did that draw her on. Perhaps she had not been fully awake talking with her father, but surely she was awake now. She began to toss and toss upon her bed. She was a little hurt that her father should so easily plan her departure from Delphi. "I thought he knew how I loved the oracle," she reflected, "but he does not know, because I am not Dryas, nor Timon, because I am not a man. Father thinks I cannot feel as he does, but I do, I do." She sat up in bed, gazing into the dark. "I have helped Delphi," she murmured rather miserably. "At least I thought I had helped Delphi by my oracles. Shall I not love my city that I have helped?" The miraculous saving of Delphi after days of danger, Theria's vision on the mountain, all had intensified her already ardent love of home. Even her god Apollo was locally peculiar to his shrine. Gods were never quite the same when worshipped in distant temples. Apollo of Delphi was nearer to Theria than Apollo anywhere else. No, no, how strange of her father to propose her going away. And he wanted her to found a city. The greatness of the task appalled her. She lay back with a sigh. In Nessa, what did the city look like, lying ruined on its distant shore? The most beautiful shore in the world, her father had called it. Apollo himself must love that city since he so insisted upon its rebuilding. A great mountain rose behind it, greater than Parnassus. This also her father had told her. She began again to wonder who could be selected to rebuild it. No doubt the priests had looked over the whole field and found no one. That was why they had chosen her. There could be no other reason for such choosing. Well, they would fall back upon Karamanor. Karamanor had commercial talent. Theria had always heard of that. And how from a little boy he had always got the best of it in every enterprise. Karamanor would make Inessa prosperous, send her ships over farthest waters, and make her rich as Sybaris. Oh, but that was not what the god wanted. There were plenty of rich colonies in the west. No, surely Apollo had some great entity for Inessa. An eidolon, she called it, a spiritual ideal or image containing the force and character of the god himself. Beauty rising from it to meet the beauty of the divine mind. Song in abundance fostered, almost worshipped there. Beauty of dance and of perfectly formed high-hearted use. Justice, yes, even to the poor who expect no just dealings. And perhaps some new philosophy, which the god had stored in his heart to give to some philosopher yet unborn, and who could be born only in this new place of free speech and high ideals, this place untrammeled by old-world mistakes. She thought of Pythagoras, Parmenides. Yes, it was from the West that the philosopher came and awakened the minds of men. Oh, who could tell what the god of pure, unutterable beauty might do if only the place were well prepared? Inessa was a god-appointed place, a god-appointed task. But Karamanor could not do it. Then, what then? It was her task. Theria's. God-given. She was unworthy, unable. Yes, yes, but the god would help her. Had he not always helped? Ah, out of such difficulties, such despairs, always that hand reached down, always that sudden brightness of mind, which was the god's presence. She seemed to see Inessa on its shore forlorn, waiting for her. She leaped from her bed and stood trembling in the darkness. What had she done? She had sent her father away. She had refused. A sentimental, maudlin refusal. Oh, if her father had only shaken her. He was too gentle these days, was father. She must tell him quickly, quickly. She must tell him she would go. She felt her way to the door, then hurried along the balcony to her father's room. He was in the heavy first sleep of night, and when she spoke to him, he did not arouse, but only sighed wearily. Melantho sat up. "Are you ill? Is it robbers?" she asked, and learning it was neither, she rated Theria in wrathful whispers for disturbing the head of the house. So Theria perforce went back to her room, there to toss, to plan, to wonder, until nearly dawn, when she fell, as with a sudden stumble, into slumber. When she awoke again, the full sun was shining brightly into the court, and Nessa, the new wonderful colony, met her awaking mind. She had been walking in its streets of dream with Etienne, but she knew that Nikander always rose with the dawn. Already he might be gone from the house to tell the priest to choose another leader. In mad haste she threw on her chiton and hurried down to the Aula. Paeon be praised! Nikander was still there, but all dressed and sandaled, going toward the door. "Father, father!" she cried breathlessly. "Wait a moment. Oh, I must see you alone." "What has happened?" he asked. "Inessa, oh father, I am going to Inessa. I must go." "What?" He smiled at her vehemence. "Changeable woman, do you expect me to veer about with all your moods?" "I didn't listen. I was blind. But perhaps I too have changed mood. I am not nearly so eager as I was last night, my daughter." He was not teasing. He meant it. There were longing and affection in his face before which she was utterly silent. Then he looked into her eyes. "Does the colony seem more possible this morning?" he asked seriously. "Possible? Oh, the wonderful task! God-given. Are you sure the priest meant it for me?" "Quite sure." It was a long, serious discussion. "There is no one else," she said humbly. "That is why they chose me, and that is why I must go. Inessa seems as if it were my own child, lonely, ruined, waiting for me." So that is your meaning this morning." She began to pace up and down. "Father, it is a thousandfold task, the founding of a city." "I should rather think so," he smiled. "Would I have the choice of men who are to go? It should be but a few men at first, and the right men." "Yes, the choice would be yours." "And the present site of the city, may I choose another? If the old site be unhealthful, or melancholy, or not beautiful, or haunted by some fate." "Yes, with the consent of the colonists." "And the laws of the city, would I select the code, and even annul laws that proved unsuited in the new land? Oh, Father, you will have to teach me. I will have to work every moment to grow wiser and better." "I will teach you," he responded, wondering at her. "Think if we could make a new city where better justice would be meted out than ever before, where even the poor man could keep up heart and courage, and where orphans would be nurtured. Oh, nobody should care for the little fatherless children but me. I would let no one else do that." She stopped her pacing and faced him. He was amazed at the change in her, a look of release, of purpose in her face that had never been there before. Seeing her eyes so shining, he realized that always heretofore they had held a bafflement, a look of discouragement and hunger. That look was gone. Now she was strangely creative, maternal, onward moving. The very lift of her head was free. He seemed to see a new Theria. "Daughter," Nikander said, I did not realize it would mean all this to you." Dear father," she said. Nikander at once plunged into the further details of the colony. Theria's enthusiasm was contagious. She listened to him absorbed. Suddenly she stopped him. Of course Etienne knows of my leadership. He approves. I did not see him, daughter. I came hot foot to you. But Etienne should have known it first of all. Her eyes looked startled, then deep trouble entered into them. Suppose he does not wish to go. But he will go, daughter. I am sure he will. I am not sure, was her troubled answer. Etienne has been so beaten about the world. He is so pathetically glad to be here at home in Hellas. I'll make him go, laughed Nikander. Oh, but that is not what I want. No, Etienne too must be happy. If he were saddened, all the joy would go out of the work. I would lose my luck. Oh, but he'll go for your sake. She seemed not to hear him. Father, she turned to him with sudden pleading. May I not see Etienne? I long to see him now. What foolishness to keep us apart. We are betrothed, Etienne and I. But I can tell him about the colony. No, I must tell him myself. Please, father, please. He could not resist her pleading. He kissed her. Impetuous daughter, he called her, but he went forth to find Etienne. End of chapter 43. Section 44 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. The Metic. Theria was heroic no longer. She ran to find Balte. Balte, dress me quick, she commanded. No, in my festival dress, the white one with a purple flowered border. And I want the lovely big necklace, too, with the golden shells and amethysts. Theria's fingers trembled as she helped to fasten the robe. Etienne is coming, she whispered. Oh, he may be here any moment. But many moments passed, and even hours. Theria went now to the upper window, now down to the door, thinking she had seen Etienne on the road, now back into the court. Why doesn't he come? She said despairingly. Oh, he is against the colony. Father is trying to persuade him. That is what keeps them. It could be nothing else. Perhaps Etienne will not let me go at all. Theria had lived so long in half-serfdom that she could not, save in certain burning moments, credit her freedom to do this thing. At last, Balte tried to persuade her to eat her breakfast. You are famished, darling, quoth the nurse. How pale you are! Your lover must not see you so pale. But Theria could not eat. She was sitting hopeless at the little table in the court when, with quiet suddenness, the door opened and Etienne was there. She rose, trembling, paler than ever. She did not move. Etienne ran to her. You are ill, darling? Why did you send for me? Ah, Theria, to see you. And he kissed her again and again, so that she had no time to answer. He had been out hunting, Etienne told her. He had returned to find the slave with her message. Oh, why had she given him this unlooked-for joy? Then brokenly, trying not to plead either in voice or look, Theria told him of the colony, and that her father wished to make her oekist, the leader of the colony. We must not go unless you wish to go, Etienne, she finished. It will mean hardships again for you. Pioneer life away from your art and the beautiful things that are your very life. It would put you far from Hellas when you have had to wander so many years. For his sake, she saw Enessa as it really was, a ruin on a desolate shore, a struggle for mere subsistence, a fight with nature and with human foes. But Etienne noted only one thing. You would be oekist? He asked, amazed. Yes, you and I together. They would place that great task in your hands? Would the priests really do that? Yes, she breathed. Oh, he broke out. It is better than anything I ever hoped for you. It is. She glanced up at him with such sudden relief that her eyes filled with tears. Look here, you little child, spoke Etienne quickly. What have you been thinking? I thought, Theria stopped. You thought that I might take away your gift? That I, your lover, your betrothed, and therefore your lawful master, would snatch your freedom away? He took her right hand, holding it against his breast, now bending to kiss it. Theria, he said soberly, you haven't begun to understand my love, not even begun to understand it. Do you mean that you really wish me to reach out to find joy in something beyond my home and children? Beyond you too? Etienne paused a moment in a sort of amazed impatience with her. Isn't that what I've been telling you in as many ways as I knew how, ever since I first caught sight of you? He inquired. I didn't believe you. Do you now? She looked her eyes so deep with gratitude that he caught his breath. It will never be beyond you, Etienne. My whole life goes to you, and there rests. And you gave me my freedom. It's there that my love rests. But that was so easy to do. Who would not have done it? Nobody but you, Theria. And with what quickness you did it. So spontaneously, so effectively. Just you. Darling, I would live my life on a frozen coast if that were the only way to give you, too, the gift of freedom. But you must be happy, she insisted. Can't you see that I cannot be glad unless— Yes, I am happy, he interrupted her. Theria, have you ever thought how humiliating it is to be a Metic? In Argus, I belong to an honored clan. Here in Delphi, I am a Metic, an alien, nor can I ever be otherwise. In the new city, I will be a citizen, the first citizen of all. Etienne, she exclaimed. He drew her close, speaking low and earnestly. And our children will be citizens also. They will inherit. In the new city, my sons shall hold up their heads. When Nikander came in a half an hour later, he found the two lovers bending over a pottery tile on which there was a map. Theria leaped up, clapping her hands like a child. He will go, she cried. Did I not tell you that he would? Answered Nikander quietly. End of chapter 44. Section 45 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. In the pleasant sunset hour, there was great excitement in Delphi village. Men and women of the aristocratic families of the town were all upon the street. Since women were abroad, it could be nothing other than a wedding. Nikander's daughter to be married. And the circumstances were so unusual that not one relative would miss it. Nikander was marrying her to a foreigner, a strange choice where Delphic youths abounded. But it was said that the choice was the girl's own, that she loved the young man. She had managed to see him, and the young man had seen Theria's face not once, but twice. This, however, was stoutly denied by the nearest of kin. The bridegroom had some wealth. That was a comfort, but he was as peculiar as the girl herself. The girl had seen Apollo in a vision and was now going to carry the god's worship overseas to a place where Polyphemus, the one-eyed giant, still lived and might at any time sally forth from some sequestered forest, where also were men with heads turned backward. These from the women. The men knew better. So they all gathered to the festive house with laughter, cousinly greetings, and jests. Nikander, richly clad and crowned with myrtle, received them at the door. Ah, there was the bridegroom, too. He was certainly handsome, even though no Delphian. His dark head was crowned. He was clad in the crimson purple so dear to the Greeks. And here was Dryas, limping from his honorable wounds, and greeting them all in his friendly way. How bright the torches burned in the aula! The smell of roast lamb was wafting from the kitchen to mingle with the odor of rose garlands everywhere. The slaves were bringing in the wine. Would the bride come soon? In the midst of this worldly clatter, the love that was between the pair burned, a thing apart, like an altar flame on a still day, clear, unswerving toward the sky. The ceremonies had begun in the morning, when Nikander sacrificed the lamb to Hera Theria. In the afternoon had come Theria's maiden cousin, bearing a pitcher of pure water from the Castalia spring. Theria had received her bridal bath, knowing that at the spring itself Aetion likewise was being purified. Theria had been all joy, full of excited laughter, pranks, and dancing. But now her joy swept into an exultation which kept her still and wistfully kind to all who served her. As said her own Greek poet, "Young life grows in those sheltered regions of its own, and the sun god's heat vexes it not, nor rain nor any wind, but it rejoices in its sweet, untroubled being." Toward evening her mother and Balte dressed Theria in her robes. They draped her beauty in the bridal saffron in which it glowed. They crowned her dark head with myrtle, accenting its symmetry. Then they covered all with the bridal veil and took her below into the torch-lighted aula. Sorry might those well be who missed the wonder of her hidden eyes. The guests received her with shouts and laughter, for the wedding was a revel and a romp, the subject of raillery and joke. The women sat at table apart, the men at their feast table. How merrily they laughed when Aetion kept glancing away from the board toward his bride and forgot to talk. It was not the bride's beauty, but Aetion's which was remarked by the guest. So they drank the wine and poured it to the gods, and flung it each in turn from his glass into a whirling cup. Whoever flung without spilling won a prize. The young couple, in spite of their curious history, made a good impression upon the guests, and several that evening asked to become members of the new colony. Then, in the midst of the Cottabus game, went up the shout, "The marriage car at the door!" Only a moment had Theria to gaze about her at the dear familiar place, seen all dimly through her veil. Then her mother took her hand and led her out into the coolness of the night. There the full round of the marriage moon made a whiter day. Aetion lifted his bride, a slim, swathed figure, into the chariot, then sat at her side. Caramanor, as Paranymphos, sat with them. The procession started, Melantho behind the chariot carrying the marriage torches, whose ruddy burning sent aloft the mystic smoke. Out from the house into the silvery radiance of the moonlit road poured forth the youths and maidens, singing, shouting, "O Hymen, Hymen, Hymenaeos, Io!" Up the Delphi high road they danced toward the little house beyond the precinct, which Nikander had given to the pair. A mad and merry rout, they followed the jolting car. One played the sounding pipes, and behind him a boy clashed aloft the thin, glittering cymbals. In a burst of joyous music they stopped at the bridegroom's door. There stood Balte with torches to receive them. Aetion's mother should have been the one to hold out that welcoming torch. No doubt she guessed this in her dark house of Hades, and wept with tearless eyes to be near her son upon his marriage night. Now Aetion lifts his bride from the chariot, carries her carefully over the high threshold, that no stumble of her foot may bring ill luck. And they go into the marriage chamber. The door is shut, And Etienne with reverent hand lifts the bridal veil to behold at last the wondering, half-frightened, yet happy face for which he has longed these many days. Soberly he gives to her the quince, symbolic food of those who are to be the mothers of men. Her hands, as she eats, tangle in the long enmeshing veil, and with a quick breath Etienne sweeps it off upon the floor. Her comely head is liberate, her shoulders and arms free. Suddenly he catches her away from ritual into a high, shining reality. He folds her in his arms, kissing her forehead and mouth. "Oh, be free," he whispers. "Your hands to act, your eyes to see, my Theria, giver of my freedom." Meanwhile, the guests outside the closed door make merry, chanting the epithalamion, calling rudely to the bridal pair, as the ancient custom is, but they hear it not. End of chapter 45. Section 46 of the Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. The Door of Escape. Then followed a busy, happy winter. All the months must be passed in making ready the colony which was to start with the early navigation of the spring. Etienne journeyed to his old home in Argos, and found there, as he had expected, certain citizens who were faithful to Hellas and secretly grieving over Argos's faithless stand in the war. Xerxes, the Persian king, was gone from Greece, but a formidable army of Persians yet lingered in Greece. Before these were vanquished, fighting was yet to be, and these few Argive men were horrified at the prospect of fighting against their own. They returned with Etienne to Delphi. Theria tested these men, shrewdly asking them questions, watching their faces. Etienne, spite of experience, was a less keen judge than she. From wrong premises, she was continually drawing right conclusions. After trying to help her, Etienne gave up, laughing. The feminine way was new. In Delphi itself, Caramanor and Aegis and a number of other kinsmen were glad to go. Those who were not married took brides forthwith. The new generation in the colony would have a strong Delphic stamp. Here was more business for their oekist, for not a bride among them wanted to go. Theria visited from one to the other, picturing the new life, persuading them. "No one in the colony shall be homesick if I can help it," she told them, and remembering her own first reluctance to go, she could not be hard upon their timidity. Theria had never known girlfriends, but in these earnest conferences she acquired them. One little wife in particular, a girl of 14 years, delicate, pale, whose father had been very severe, and whose husband was now taking his turn at severity. Theria took her to heart with great tenderness. She was herself astonished at the way the little creature bloomed and grew strong under the new encouragement. And now Theria must receive the grain to be laden in the ships, grain both for food and for planting. Theria tended the tiny grapevines and treasured the seeds of useful herbs and vegetables to be carried overseas. No seeds of flowers, for the Greeks did not plant them. Besides, were not the slopes and capes of Sicily one far-flung flowerland? As for Nikander, the days were not long enough for him to teach his daughter all she now must know. The Delphic laws, the modes of city government, precautions for city health, religious customs in which she must be vigilant and exacting. Her hungry learning brought tears to Nikander's eyes, but often these were tears of pride, for the quickness of her mind, her strong opinions so intimately his own, her quick refusal of wrong methods or shallow reasoning. But it was perhaps Melantho who in these days noted the greatest change in Theria. Theria had always been haughty towards her mother, disobedient and sharp of answer. Melantho's commonplaceness, her willingness for the jog-trot of woman's life exasperated her daughter, and when Melantho tried to make the daughter keep to the same dull pace, there had arisen quarrels and bitterness. But in these days of free outlet, Theria grew gentle toward her mother, affectionate, though a little condescending with all as daughters are apt to be. Then while Theria was yet unaware, the affection grew into respect for the stubby little figure that went pottering around the house, making content out of such meager materials. Homespuns, tapestries, embroidered things, these were Melantho's joy. These, like the gay patchwork quilts of a later day, were the spirit outlets for a housed woman. One day, timidly, she brought forth to her daughter a balcony hanging, a gorgeous thing. The little human figures wrought upon it told an ancient legend lost, save that this ancient woven design preserved it to the memory and men's eyes. The little men and women were archaic, almost grotesque, but perfect in decorative value. For in Hellas even such delicate, perishable things took on the inevitable beauty which flowed from Greek souls through their fingers. Melantho spread it before Theria on a table. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It is beautiful, beautiful," said Theria, passing a caressing hand over the deep reds and gorgeous peacock blues. "Do you know, Mother, whenever this was hung from the balcony when I was a little child, I used to shout and prance with joy. Many a time you punished me and did not know why I was so noisy." Melantho looked down. "How strange," she said. "It always makes me feel that way, too." "You? Mother, you?" "Of course," corrected Melantho. "I never did it. I never pranced." Theria laughed, a thrill of affectionate laughter. "I wish you had," she declared. "I was wondering," said Melantho, hesitating, "if you would not take this with you to your new home." "I wouldn't think of taking it," said Theria. "It is too precious, and it belongs here in the dear old home where it has always been." "Yes," said Melantho, "the ship will be crowded with useful things which you really need." Something in Melantho's face as she gathered the folds together caught Theria. "Mother, do you really want me to take it? Are you willing to part with it?" she exclaimed. Melantho paused in her timid way. "You dear mother," said Theria, shaking her mother's shoulders in an affectionate protest. "Don't you suppose I'd rather have it than 100 merely useful things? I hated to be selfish." Melantho's face shone. "I have so many more." "But none so glorious as this one, Mother. Oh, at first, when I have only a little hut and hang this in it, it will be home. And, Mother, I'll feel when my babies are born and see this, that they will be seeing something that is really Delphi. Delphi." "Perhaps other children," ventured Melantho, "other children of the colony will see it too. The town will be so poor and bare at first. Nothing beautiful, nothing." Melantho was quite unresigned to Theria's going, could see no possible reason for it. "Yes," Theria conceded, "it will be all of that. Huts and mere shelters at first, but it will never look like that to me." "Yes, but the children who are too little to remember Delphi," objected Melantho, "how will it look to them?" "I will bring them to see this, yes I will, until our temples are built and my dear Etienne makes statues of gods and men. Only think, Mother, it will be your gift, the gift of your fingers, which will keep alive our heritage of beauty until the town brings it to life again in itself." Many a long hour did Nikander, Etienne, and Theria together study the maps of the western colonies. "You see," said Nikander one day, "by this map how near Inessa lies to her unkind neighbor Katana. That is a problem for you, Theria, for you also, Etienne." But Etienne was studying the map with knitted brows. "I wish it showed whether marble is found there," he said. "Do you suppose Syracuse would furnish bronze?" Nikander clapped him on the shoulder, laughing. "Oh, incorrigible sculptor! What did you promise me?" he asked. Etienne blushed like a boy. "In the new city," he pleaded, "surely my fault will be overlooked." "As a leader in the new city," responded Nikander, "you should set an example to all." "Isn't that rather an undertaking, Nikander?" sighed the rueful artist. But Theria took Etienne's brown, skillful hand in hers. "Nay, father," she said defensively, "deny him not. He is a born sculptor. His gift is from the gods. We cannot stop it. As for me, I have been inquiring among the colonists. I have found several bronze workers and workers of marble. These shall be Etienne's helpers." End of chapter 46. Section 47 of the Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. Alien Meadows. In the early spring, 6 good ships rode at anchor in the harbor of Kira. They were the small craft of that day. Hardy the folk who would put to sea in them. In Delphi the goodbyes were earnest and tearful. Many were the anxious sacrifices paid for the safe voyaging, many the omens taken, peering into the future. It is said that in those days more than 1/3 of all navigation went to the bottom. It was a far journey. The smallness and slowness of the craft multiplied the distance 100-fold. At last, one bright spring morning, Etienne and Theria, hand in hand, and the little band of colonists following them, started down the hill road toward Kira. Melantho could not bring herself to go to the port, could not bear to see her daughter actually lose herself upon the sea, but Nikander walked wordless beside his daughter. Here was Theria's first viewing of the sea, a small stretch of intense blue far on the horizon between the hills. In the journey down from Delphi, the dreamy hills unfold and stand aside in delicate succession until all the violet gulf of Corinth is open to the view. Etienne quietly put aside Theria's veil as the first glimpse of it opened. "The sea," he said with that love in his voice that every Greek understood. The little company passed slowly down the steep olive grove and came at last to the small port of Kira. Ah, how impatient the bright ships pull at their anchors. Birds impatient to be gone. Bright they are as birds in their plumage, red and peacock blue. The grotesque prows dance as if alive. One prow is a boar, another a goose, another a huge bird, all dipping in the waves. At the hawse holes of each ship are 2 bright orange-colored eyes. How else can they see their way across the misty deep? 4 are merchant vessels, the so-called round ships, built for cargo and for steady going. These have a single oblong sail and 8 or 10 long sweeps to help the windless days or days of contrary winds. The other 2 ships are triremes, necessary for defense in those western waters where pirates are to be dealt with. These long narrow ships, with 3 tiers of oars on either side and a sharp beak, are built for war. Indeed, one of them has fought in the Battle of Salamis, an actual helper in the freedom of Greece and well nigh sacred. Theria, Etienne, and their kinsfolk are to go in her. Nikander kisses his daughter and weeps like a child now in this last moment of goodbye. Theria clings to him in the sharpest sorrow she has ever known. With laughter and tears, the colonists set forth in tiny rowboats and climb aboard. Theria as Oekist, a figure of white fluttering garments, standing on the deck of her ship, lights the incense upon the little altar there. The oar-masters lift their hands as one would start a chorus. The flute player begins to play a wild, rhythmic tune. Now a shout, and the 3 tiers of oars either side the ship lift, grating, groaning, creaking, a mighty noise. Then all together, like huge, powerful wings, they smite down upon the water, which whitens into spray. Forth springs the trireme like a hound, half lost in its own glittering spume. Up go the yellow sails of the round boats. A cry of love and longing goes up from the dear ones ashore, and the colonists are off. All that day the little fleet coasted along the Gulf of Corinth, one of the most picturesque inland waters in the world. At night they drew up their ships upon the shore and slept under the stars. Sunrise saw them off again, the round boats using their long sweeps in that still golden hour. All the way, as was the Greek fashion, they hugged the shore along Aetolia, Acarnania, Epiros, keeping within the islands for safety, arriving at Corcyra, that western outlook isle of Greece, the 4th day. From Corcyra they made the bold voyage across the Ionian Sea to Italy. Theria's mind, so cultivated yet unspoiled, so educated yet starved, viewed all things with an eagerness usual to a child of 7. Partly her cloistering had done this, partly it was a racial characteristic. The Hellene was always young, and in this the Nikander family were true Hellenes. Day after day she stood at the prow, never tiring of the broad and changing sea, of the islands, white-peaked or lying like brazen shields on the glancing deep, of the dolphins that played about the ship, symbols of her god, of the rise of the moon like a full-opened lonely flower above the waste of waters. She asked questions of Etienne constantly like a child, and who so glad as he to answer? Etienne was her Odysseus, who knew all the wonders of travel, its dangers and its joys. In the Gulf of Tarentum they met storms which drove the fleet apart. One of the ships was lost, and Theria wept for it as for close kindred. They reached Italy, coasted down to the point of it, sighted Sicily, the great isle of snowy peaks, and came at evening, as is the wondrous way of ships, into the tiny bay of their desire. It was Etienne and Theria who stepped down first from the galley and waded through the shallows to the shore. Together they stooped and kissed the alien land, which was to become their own. In spite of all their cultivation, they were not farther from the soil than the hidden creatures of wood and field. Then the ships were beached. What sound is so exquisite of far meaning as this grating of glad prow upon new sands? The Greeks climbed the shore, talking eagerly, laughing, looking about them as only new emigrants look, with hope of future generations in their eyes. Caramanor and Aegis, as priests of Apollo, builded an altar, scattered barley and poured wine, lighting the fire with the sacred flames which they had brought from Delphi and had carefully guarded all the voyage through. But this done, Theria made them hide their fire for fear of being seen. Their foe, alas, was no Sicilian, but the Greek town of Catana, which flourished farther up the coast. So they ate a frugal supper and wearily, thankfully, slept on the lonely sand. Next morning, before sunrise, Theria woke and spoke to Etienne. "Come," she whispered, "let's go into the land and see what we may see." "We must leave Caramanor in charge," answered Etienne. "They must not think us lost." This matter accomplished, they stole hand in hand out of the sleeping camp and up the overgrown paths toward the ruined town. The enemy had done his work well. The town was a pitiful sight, Greek and ruined by Greeks. They passed beyond the town into the upland meadows, where carpets of anemones, purple, white, and pink, reminded them that here the maid Persephone had gathered flowers, what time the dark steeds of Hades and his yet darker chariot came rattling down upon her. The place seemed utterly deserted. All distances were hid in mists. The dews and high grasses drenched them to the knees. Theria had to curdle her dress, as she had not done in the glen at home. But with this freedom her spirit rose. She began to go more eagerly, leaping along the way, clapping her hands at each new stretch of bloom, breaking into snatches of old Delphic song. Etienne began almost to fear that she was too much a child, that no responsibility had really touched her. Ah, well, he thought tenderly, I can take the care. After all, her years are child years only. They began to climb the hills and into a brightening world. Now turning, they could see the beach with its faint dark patch where was their camp. But the ships were hid in the little river which here emptied into the sea. Full morning now, they came to a pleasant hill. It jutted out like a headland into a fertile, untilled vale. A forest of cypress and wild olive crowned the hill, and the shade received them with the sense of rest. But Theria did not rest. She began to explore, and in a depression of the hillside she came upon a full-flowing spring. With a hasty invocation she knelt to drink, and as she did so, the birds flew up in flocks with a whir of wings. Instantly she recalled the oracle which had been given to the Sicilian youth, Hylas. Rebuild your city upon a hill, where trees invite the birds. Etienne, Etienne, she called, and as he and the slave came running, oh, I have found the site of our city, truly, I think I have found it. Reverently they drank of the spring. How unbelievably sweet after the stale water of the ship. It tastes like our own Castalia water, she said. Oh, mistress, it is Castali, spoke the Delphic slave. I'd know Castalia water anywhere. The dear nymph has come under the sea to greet us here. And Theria believed him. Etienne, come look. Is not the hill defensible from every side? Is not the plain near enough for tillage? You know so much better than I. Is it not better to be here hidden among the hills than down on the shore where the enemy will find us too soon? She was serious, no laughter now, and sharp as a hawk. Yes, yes, said Etienne. Busily, carefully they searched the place. Then they halted as if at some command. The mist had been drawing off, and suddenly, borne upon the clouds, the glorious snowy crest of Etna stood in the sky, its white steam floating from it as if it itself would float away into nothingness. Then far below the rugged coastline trembled into view, and all the blue sea. Theria closed her eyes at the pain of the too great beauty. The gods have spoken, said Etienne softly. We will go back and tell our people. We have found the site of our city. End of chapter 47. Section 48 of The Perilous Seat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. Town Makers. How eagerly the colonists heard the story. How impatiently they hurried up to the place themselves. Some were at first not satisfied with the sight, those who had always lived directly upon the seashore. But in the council which met under the trees, the Delphian mountain dwellers prevailed. Next day all began to carry their goods to Theria's hill and started their work. First must come the wall. All labored at this, slave and free, for the thing was of moment. Huts and shelters of branches must serve the people for this first while. Then the Temple of Apollo was begun at once, and of marble. In this work Etienne was perfectly happy. He it was who selected the temple site. With true Greek instinct, he made the temple the focus of the landscape, the place toward which everything centered, hill and vale and reverent climbing path. It was Etienne who later modeled the sculptures of the pediment and the bronze image of the youthful Apollo, which was to stand within. Indeed, the town was a place of youth. No gray heads anywhere, no blasted hopes nor pent-up desires. And when these are absent, no one can believe that they ever will come. So well did the sequestered situation serve them that their enemy, the Khatanan neighbors, found them not until months had passed. And when they did find them, the new colonists drove them off in a quick fight. Theria's hours were full, those hours which at home used to drag in hated vacancy. The colonists themselves were Theria's constant care. To one she gave ardent praise, to another merited rebuke. The choosing of laws, the unexpected setting aside of old laws which in this new land were found to be ill-fitted, the keeping of the council high-purposed and pure, these were her duties. Theria did not sit with the council, but her advice was paramount. As former priestess of Apollo and seer of a vision, she exercised a power which as a mere woman she could never have attained. And strangely enough, her poet quality did not suffer in this public activity, but, as is frequent with the Greek, rather thrived and flowered in it. Late in the winter her first child was born. The colonists thought it was misfortune that the child should be a girl, but Etienne took this dispensation of the gods with good heart. He lifted the darling creature in his arms, gazing into the tiny face which from its first hour knew how to smile. Then smiling himself, he draped the little thing in a long old-fashioned string of pearls and laid her softly beside her mother. "But what is this?" asked Theria. "In what strange fashion have you decked my child?" He laughed with happiness. "Do you not recognize them, dear Theria, the jewels of my freedom, which your eldest daughter must wear? Did I not purchase them from Apollo and bring them overseas in hope of her?" And Theria realized how Etienne loved his little girl. In the second spring came a shipload of Athenians to join the colony. They gave the town a new impress from the first moment of arrival. For who should arrive with them but Nikander himself? Theria was sitting crooning happily to her child when he stepped over her high threshold as casually and unannounced as though he had come from next door. Theria came near to fainting at such unlooked-for joy. Absence in those days was deathlike in its completeness and disconnection. It seemed to Theria as though her dear father had come from the dead. Then, with what happy tears and soft laughter did she lift up the baby Theria to show him, and with what pride did she lead her father out into her town. Etienne met them at the doorway. Then, with what seriousness and pride did the two lead Nikander about the new streets, to the marketplace, to their pure Castalian spring, to their Acropolis. Here was the temple, Etienne's own. It stood unfinished, without cella or roof, with distant Etna and the violet horizon of sea glimpsing between the white new columns. It seemed a spirit thing, not yet quite of this earth. Indeed, it was never to be other than a heavenly, unbelievable beauty. In Etienne's workshop stood his clay Apollo, watching, as with wistful, marveling eyes, while the craftsman brought him to life in bronze. Beside it was another model, at sight of which Nikander exclaimed aloud with pleasure. "It is a victory," explained Etienne, "which I made after a battle with the Khatanans." It was a slender, elastic figure, winged, the accepted victory form. Like the Lattice model, she was moving strongly forward, moving as it seemed into the wind which swept back her long draperies in lovely, free, yet simple lines. She held her victory trumpet, but had forgotten to sound it. Her dreamy face seemed looking through some parting of the mists, and she was walking straight into her vision. She had forgotten present victory in victories to be. The figure, the countenance, the clean-shaped, filleted head were Theria's own. "How did you ever capture her?" cried Nikander. "The very spirit of my Theria." "She stood so at the prow of the ship," said Etienne happily. "Day after day, questioning, always, and so full of joy. I did not put my hand to the clay until she was complete in my mind." "Ah," laughed Theria, "so that is the reason you looked at me so strangely and sometimes did not answer me. I thought it was because you loved me." "And was it not?" Etienne retorted, kissing her. "This statue," said Nikander, "shall be put at once into marble, and I require it as your first city gift to Delphi." Centuries afterward, a sculptor of the island of Samothrace turned to this pure statue of the earlier day for the type of his winged victory. In his later hands the draperies were more boisterous in the breeze, the figure more robust, the skill of handling more complete, but he never caught the far sweet dreaminess of the face which Etienne knew. Nikander's visit to the colony gave the citizens great courage and conviction. His praise was ardent, his criticism unsparing. Thus no doubt many a time had men of the mother city helped and inspired the little cities beyond the misty deep. Communication between Delphi and the colonies was astonishingly constant. As years went by, Etienne and Theria journeyed back and forth over the sea, carrying the city gifts to Delphi, bringing back Delphi's encouragement and advice. Upon these journeys they took their children, the glorious children of whom Nikander had prophesied long before. During the first of these journeys, Theria longed with almost painful intensity for the arrival in Delphi. But once there, though she loved her place of golden tripods more deeply than ever, she chafed at old restrictions, and in the sojourn over, she turned her face toward her western home, feeling that it was home indeed. In this western home, life was simple but very rich. From here, the young victors went forth to the Pythian and Olympic games. It was of such western boys mainly that Pindar sang. Many such a boy was brought back to the little mountain place by his townsmen and celebrated almost as a god. Of these, 3 in succession were Theria's own sons. It was easy to worship such youths, not merely for their strength and outward beauty, but for their nimble wit and their delicate, fine-trained imagination. They were gentle-seeming, but strong as tempered steel. In this little hill town of Enessa, poets and hymn-makers were born, and one of those early scientists who amaze us by what they fathomed without instruments or scientific gear. Several young philosophers who were claimed as being from the more famous towns and schools were here born and bred. The city flourished. Its modesty kept it for many years from being drawn into the terrible wars which wrecked Sicily. It tilled the fertile plain below its Acropolis and built the old town on the shore for a port. But farther than this it did not go. Theria and her colonists had the Delphic tradition, which was neither conquest nor dominion, but an intensive perfecting of the life within the town. And after the passing of the original builders, the town was, for many generations, the same. For it is curiously true that a town will retain for hundreds of years the spirit of its founders. Men may flock in and overwhelm it in numbers, but the original subtle spirit, be it good or bad, absorbs the newcomers. In this lies the immortal glory of the pioneer. All is silent now. The hillock lies as ever beholding the infinite glory of the smoking mountain, the violet vivid sea, the far-flung island coast where headland after headland sweeps outward in majestic successive distances, and between are sheltered bays, sickle-shaped, untenanted, and pure. Anemones and violets nod in the sea winds, growing in the very cella of the temple. Sheep polish the marble pillars with their fleeces as they pass, or leave white woolly wisps upon the brambles in the marketplace for birds to gather for their nests. But who knows whether the godlike young Sicilians who here still tend their flocks may not show us, shadowed and dulled with ignorance, some gesture of Etienne's beauty, some glow of Eleutheria's grace. The end. End of chapter 48. End of The Perilous Seat by Carolyn Dale Snedeker.